The working environment needs to be fun. Everything you're doing in life needs to be fun.
How do we support our own institutions? How do we support our own businesses?
We feel that with the black man spending $20 billion a year, not setting up any businesses, not creating any industry, not creating any job opportunities for his own town, he's not in a moral position to tell the white man that he's discriminating against him.
And instead of breaking somebody down, I look at what they do great and I go, wow, people that love and really want great for themselves go, what are they doing right?
What's good? Welcome to another episode of It's Black is Lit. I'm your host, Town, here on location at the University of Arkansas. And today, I'm joined by the brilliantly black and talented Dr. Caree Banton.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for stopping by the show today.
Great.
We're excited to talk about the brilliant work that you're doing. So, but for starters, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me where you're from originally.
Well, you know, I'm from the 876, Jamaica. From the Caribbean. Came to the U.S. in 2001. Thought I was going to go to Wimbledon. Yeah, I didn't make it. So I had to fall back on my other skills. So that's how I kind of ended up here in academia.
How did you end up here in Northwest Arkansas?
It's a long, circuitous journey. I came to the U.S., as I said, in 2001, in Behind God's Back in West Virginia. And moved from West Virginia and went to GSU, you know, Grambling State University. You know what it is. Don't act like you don't know. And I got my bachelor's of history and bachelor's of public administration there. And then I went on to do a master's in history at the University of New Orleans, during which time I studied in Austria. And then I went to Vanderbilt, where I did my PhD. And while there, I went to Ghana to do another master's degree because I wanted to, connect with the continent. And I was studying Liberia at the time, so went to Ghana, did a master's degree in development studies, and then graduated from Vanderbilt after I defended my dissertation in 2013 and came here, but graduated in 2014.
Okay. So how did you originally get interested in history?
So I am always interested in stories. I love stories, like all kinds of stories, gossip. I like, I'd find myself where old people were telling things about the olden days. I'd want to be in the middle of it. I'd get in trouble for like going under the bed to read books. I just wanted to, as they say, stories are data with soul. And I just feel drawn to stories. I love stories. And so, I studied history in the Caribbean. I think pretty much like here you choose a science track or I didn't choose. I kind of like just mixed up everything because I was, they're like, you should be a doctor. You're smart. I'm like, but I want to tell stories, So I was doing biology and agricultural science and chemistry, but also history and literature and all of these other things. And I came to the U.S. and like any proper migrant, right? My parents tried to force me into computer programming. I can barely turn on my computer, okay? To this day, I have problems. So I was finding myself going to class like, another C++ class. I'd rather chew my arm off than go to this class. So I finally, I got the first time D and then took it again and got a C. I was like, I am done. I'm out. Peace. And I was like, I went straight back to history. Even now, my parents think I'm going to be a lawyer someday. I'm like, I have several degrees already. I'm a whole important person. I'm important where I work, sir. So my parents. And they're like, no, you'll go get a law degree someday. I'm like, not gonna happen. But so I think just by the connections that I made and I guess the interest that I had, people just kept passing me on from thing to thing. So from Grambling, I met the director of the graduate program down in New Orleans. He was like, apply. Went down there. Then the director was like, you should do your PhD. I was like, what's a PhD? Like, apply to Vanderbilt, and so, by God's grace, I'm here. Yeah.
So when did history become a passion for you?
Like I said, I think from young. I think growing up, I was always interested. As little kids, you're just curious. But why this and why that and whatnot? And I was, growing up in Jamaica, and you get these kinds of subliminal messages all the time. I was very much interested in the Rastas, right? I went to all girls proper. They tried to make me into a lady. It didn't work, and I was always rebelling. I was always interested in people who pushed against the system, rebelled, and the Rastas in Jamaica to me were the most visual representation of that. I wasn't allowed to have dreads in high school. I tried to have like a little one in the middle of my hair. Like they came and delocked it like in devotion and whatnot. But always reading about those kinds of, always felt that ancestral call to like hear the stories, to understand why I was in the place that I was and on whose shoulders I stand. And that gave me strength, I remember, so there was stigmas against locks and everything. And my dad's like, if you get locks, you can't come back into my yard. And I'm like, bye. Bye-bye. And so I was just very much interested in people who rebelled, pushed back against the system, stood up for people's rights. I'm the kind of person who's always rooting for the underdog. And that's why I didn't root for the Lakers. I'm always rooting for the little person to rise up and, that kind of stuff. But I was always just interested in stories of struggle. And growing up in Jamaica too, we heard Anansi stories all the time. Anansi, the trickster spider that followed us across the ocean from West Africa, right? So, I became passionate, and then when at my high school, I had a history teacher who was from Guyana, and he introduced me to revolutionaries. I think quite unlike what you guys get taught in high school here in the U.S. I was reading C.L.R. James, Black Jacobins in high school, Eric Williams, Capitalism and Slavery. I was reading Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I was just like, and I played every sport in high school. I got the award for student who contributed the most to the life of the school. Every bus that left for a team, I was on there. And I tried to not go to any classes, but I was always at history. And now when my friends talk to me and they're like, oh, we knew you were gonna be a history. And I'm like, how? And they're like, in history class, you were at front like this, you were into it. Yeah.
Well, that's I think that's cool because it shows a personal connection that you have for telling the stories and kind of revealing the struggles of people that come from places that you come from, right? Mm-hmm. So tell me about Gerard Ralston and what made you want to write More Auspicious Shores.
Right. At the University of New Orleans, I had written my master's thesis on music, right? So I wrote this thesis called Between Two Giant Sounds, right? The transition from reggae music to dancehall, right? So you guys might know Bob Marley, but the transition to Shabba Ranks, right? And the political transformation that accompanied that, right? So how politicians were co-opting music and how musicians were co-opting politics. I wanted to look at that intersection, right? Because it's written in the music and it's written in the politics, right? Because during that time when the CIA invaded Jamaica, because our prime minister was siding with Fidel Castro and leaning left with democratic socialism way before Bernie. And we're like, this is the period of containment, right? You don't want socialism to be rearing its, head in your backyard. And so the CIA went in Jamaica, armed gangs, destabilized the whole country. You can hear a lot of those early songs and albums that came out. You can hear the gunshots in the background because the studios were in the ghettos. So the actual beat of the gunshots is actually written into the music. Police, sirens, all of that kind of stuff. But you have to think where that kind of come from, right? Like some of that was by accident, right? Because people were taping in Tivoli Gardens and Trenchtown and all of these places where these things were happening. And so it became fashionable to have these things. So I thought I was going to Vanderbilt to write about that, to continue that. And my advisor was like, no. He said, go to the library, look for something in abolition, colonization, blah, 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 because that's his area of expertise. So I go to the library and I find this guy. I was doing a library class. I found this guy, Gerard Ralston. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to write about this guy. He's negotiating diplomacy for Liberia, right? In the 19th century. How difficult could, that must have been, right? How difficult it was for Haiti as well, right? That these are black nations and how race affects the ways in which these diplomatic relationships are formed. This must have been difficult. So I'm researching him and I find this letter that he wrote to a group of Barbadians telling them to come to Liberia. And it's like, what? Why is he writing to Barbadians, people from the Caribbean, to come to a colony created by America to deport black people from America to Africa? Why would Caribbean people want to go to an American colony when they could very well go next door to Sierra Leone, which is the British colony that does the same thing? So I was very fascinated about the choice that these Barbadians, right? In the Caribbean, we say Bajans, but you're American people. So I was trying to think about why they would want to go to an American colony. But also think about, did they write him? So now I have to go to Barbados to see if their letters are there, or maybe go to London, to the archives there to see what would cause them to want to write a letter to petition an American diplomat helping Liberia to want to go to Liberia. So, of course, like a good Atlantic World project, doing that whole research all over the place, all of these different archives to kind of piece this kind of history together. But it fascinated me the ways in which it was coming together because it's all the things that I love. I love black people, and this is like all the black people. Like, oh my God, it was like my wet dream. It's like African Americans, Africans, and Caribbean people. It's like, it's lit up in Liberia and it wants to turn up, This is a Negropolis that they're creating over here,
Yeah.
And so I get to Liberia and I'm looking at all these groups of black people who have gathered in the Republic, and I'm wondering, who gets to define what blackness is? What is blackness in a space that is calling itself the Black Republic? And who gets to define it? And how is it linked to citizenship, right? And who is excluded, So all of these kinds of questions, right? Because there are all these different categories of people: Caribbean people, African Americans, Native people.
Yeah.
I category of people called African recaptives who were placed in Liberia from slave ships that they took on board the Atlantic. So all of that fascinated me, and so that's what became the book.
So tell me about some of the successes that you've experienced in your journey as a professional historian.
Oh dear. So I'm a late bloomer. But one of my earliest success was when I got the Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship that it enabled me to go to Ghana to do that degree. I mean, I wanted to, go to Africa, and I couldn't believe that I got a scholarship to do that with a lot of money. Like, you're giving me this 30 grand? What? So I got that, and then when I was about to come back, I got the Andrew Mellon Fellowship at the Robert Penn Warren Center. And then I got here in 2015, I got the Schomburg Fellowship. I was like, this is heavy. This heavy hitter stuff. I was like, so I got the Schomburg. And then I got another Mellon in 2017, the Nancy Wise McKeel for diversity and early career scholars. So, just trying to, make it do what it do.
Yeah, you balling out. So tell me a little bit about the challenges that you faced along your journey.
Oh my goodness. So, as someone who is also in this field, and, we as Black people come in it for very specific, we're passionate. We feel, like I said earlier, that our ancestors put us in particular places to exercise a certain kind of duty, right? And when you get in academia, you are promoted and judged on particular things. You have teaching, research, service. We feel that we're continuing something that was started long before. And so, but we have to be very careful in terms of thinking strategically, right? If you want to progress in academia, because it's weighted in very specific ways. You get 40% for teaching, 40% for research, 20% for service. The service is where your heart is. And so you have students asking you all the time, and even community and everywhere, asking you, do talks, do things, whatever, and you want to do it because that's what you naturally enjoy, and you feel like that's your calling and why you're there. But that's not what's going to promote you. You don't get promoted based on that. In 1 million service, I met with 10,000 students. You get promoted based on you publishing book, going to archives, winning grants, teaching your courses. It's difficult too in the classroom where, I teach very difficult topics. I teach race at a historically white school. They're not interested, and it can be very problematic.
And even as the flagship university for the state, it still it lacks in the progressive approach to finding solutions for these problems. Mm-hmm. There's no real incentive for the university to change and to look better.
And we're hampered as it is by the legislature as well, and it's almost like under those kinds of political legislative constraints, it delimits you in certain ways as to what you think is possible and what you can do. It's like your dreams are not within this wide expansive universe. It's within the universe created by these people who have particular agendas.
So what advice would you give to a young person who aspires to become a professional historian?
To be straight up, as a Black person, trying to take care of your family, I would say think about it very carefully. Because, we're in a crazy job market. As you know, professors don't be retiring until they're 80. You know what I mean? So it's the turnover rate ain't there like in other jobs. You know what I mean? Like in computer science, that's why a liberal arts degree is great, right? Because it gives you these skills that will last you a lifetime. You know, you can change, you can go to different areas or whatever. But if you're in the humanities, you have those critical thinking skills, you have those writing skills, you know, you can unpack and all of that kind of stuff. You really, you know, it can really serve you in very good ways. So I am very confident that, you know, all these things that you're learning, and with the prestige of a PhD and you having your own business and doing your own thing, that, you know, my kind of fears about what the job market are won't necessarily be something that you have to think about, but those are real concerns that I think anyone should think about, because the jobs aren't there, you know what I mean? And so we have to think about, is it ethical to continue to, you know, in very much how we've usually done this kind of stuff.
That's insightful. I think that's important for any young person to take a real look at what their prospects are.
You have to be practical.
Yeah.
You have to be practical. I mean, I don't know about your family, but I come from a family in Jamaica where people are looking at me for help. So I have to, you know, I have to be practical at all times in terms of how am I going to win so that my people can also win. You know what I mean? So you always have to keep your eyes on the prize.
So Dr. Banton, tell us where we can find out more about you and the work that you're doing.
Well, you can find me at Diasporize on Twitter. Diasporize on Twitter. And that's it, because I'm not cool enough to be on Instagram. That's the whole thing.
And do you mind telling me a little bit about the upcoming podcast that you're trying to get launched?
Right. So I'm trying to launch a podcast for African and African American studies to really show the ways in which African and African American studies is very much positioned at the intersection of many of the things that are going on at this university. Much of the research that goes on here, much of the kinds of quest for diversity, you know. So the podcast is going to be a space in which we can talk about the ways in which all these kinds of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary studies are taking place, you know, holding together the values of African and African American studies.
We're looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a pretty hot podcast.
I hope so.
Well, we definitely appreciate you taking the time to stop by the show with us today. We're excited about all the work that you're doing, and we appreciate you being a visionary that's creating change for people like you and me. So everybody follow Dr. Banton on our social page. And up next on this Black is Lit, we're going to have another edition of Get Out Your Feelings and our word of the day. What's good? It's your boy Town the Hood Scholar. It's time to get out your feelings.
Got me in my feelings. Got me in my feelings. Gotta be real with it. Get up out your feelings for this chopper, make you dance like shit.
Today, we're going to talk about the essence of a dream. Throughout our daily lives, we are constantly bombarded with all forms of communication and messaging. Thoughts and communications, text and email, and media of all forms engage us with a multitude of motivations and inspirations. But there is one critical method of communication that we often overlook. According to scientists, the brain operates in 3 forms of being: waking, sleeping, and dreaming. In his 1977 publication, The Dragons of Eden, Speculations on the Evolution of Human Intelligence, author and astrophysicist Dr. Carl Sagan provided insightful theories about how the mind operates. Dreaming is a state of consciousness that can occur both while asleep and awake. Dr. Allison Truitt and Dr. Dominic Cichetti of Yale University determined that there is a verifiable link between dreaming and the different lifestyles of animals. They concluded that predators dream more than prey, which often tend to have a dreamless sleep. Are dreams more than unintelligible mind activity? The study revealed that those animals that are more likely to pursue or attack actually experience more dreams. Dreams, in essence, can reveal our passions, mission, and purpose. Check out this clip for another example.
So when I think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, I'm reminded that there are different kinds of dreams, right? There are ordinary dreams, there are daydreams, there are prophetic dreams, and there are nightmares too. And growing up, I learned the prophetic dream of Martin Luther King, which is actually just the very end of that famous speech. And the vast majority of that speech actually articulates what at his time was a nightmare for people living in this country, but we don't learn that part of it, right? We don't learn about when he says that Negroes were living on an island of poverty or were languishing in the corners of American society, an alien in their own land. But it's something about that optimistic soundbite circulating in American discourse without the related nightmare that went with it, that's in the same speech. It's a disservice to each subsequent generation, right? It's like we really want to hear freedom ring, but we want to tune out the sirens of oppression. That nightmare that people still live with, that King talked about multiple times referring to police brutality in the I Have a Dream speech, makes me feel like he and his peers were fully aware of the nightmare that people still live in. It makes the prophetic part of his dream even more powerful.
Wow, one of the best plays I ever made. When I was playing for San Francisco and I went back to my house, Georgia Dome, to play the Falcons, studied my butt off. They were driving. They came out of trips. And I was on the corner and I eased out. I seen it was a flood route. Penalty. Had to do it over. When you know it, the next play, same formation, penalty, they had to do it again. They came out in the same darn formation. I said, I know they ain't this crazy. And they ran the same darn flood. Got him. Rest is history. I jumped that thing, I stepped that thing, looked at their sideline, and let me tell you something about that. I had told the late great Dwight Clark in Common Policy a dream I had that week, that I was gonna pick a ball off. I was gonna go down their sideline, I was gonna high step them fools, and I was gonna look at them. And I was gonna hit that dancing pause for the picture right in the middle of the thing. And that's just the way it played out. God always showed me things before I made it happen.
Basically, dreams are a platform for divine communication, and they provide us the coordinates for our mission in this life. The details of your dreams will one day become reality when you pursue them in earnest. By enhancing our understanding of the essence of a dream, we can begin to walk in the fulfillment of our greater purpose.
Imagination. Now, the action or process of forming such images or concepts. The ability to face and resolve difficulties. Resourcefulness. Imagination is the beginning of a new reality.